This afternoon, and over the past 5 years, I've learned that being an activist is predominantly frustration, anger, and despair. Frustration. Is anyone actually listening? The media never really seems to be up to our speed. It seems the Age won't print a letter. We're depicted as faceless, or a celebrity novelty, or worse, NIMBYs. And yet I've never encountered such an articulate group with less selfish motives. Anger. It's inevitable when the minister overrides permanently argued informed community opinion, then ignores council's recommendations for unanimity, and then fast-tracks crap, outmoded design concepts. Despair. The Premier decides to remove councils entirely from the equation. It's like Get Smart and the cone of silence. They'd love us to crumble. They'd love us to cave in. They'd love us to just go away. But we won't. My colleague, Mary Drost, received an abusive phone call from a developer. He screamed at her. You people have got to understand there's a tidal wave of development happening that you cannot stop. I said, Mary, how did you feel? She said, exhilarated. I knew we had him worried. She told him she would fight to the death for him to be able to express his opinion and that he should respect the same for her. Mary is brilliant at playing the democracy card at a crucial moment, even though we all know her to be a card-carrying anarchist. I too have experienced moments of exhilaration. Let's talk about a few little bits of good news. There's today, of course. It's that feeling, that out of the blue, supreme, transcendent, but very fleeting joy. For example, did you hear about the Eastern Arcade building in Burke Street? An exquisite, rare and intact example of Neo-Mughal or Indo-Saracenic style dating from 1872. A beautiful 19th century hotel interior was under the planning minister's development permit destined to be pulverised. You may remember it better as Dimmies. Thanks to the diligent and persistent and reasoned efforts of cultural historian Mimi Colligan, theatre historian Elizabeth Cunn, and Peter Johnson, architect, all members, by the way, of the Victorian Theatre Trust subcommittee, the ruling for demolition was overturned. The developer must incorporate the structure into the new project, weaving its significance into the ongoing story of Melbourne. I had a similar frisson from page 2 of The Age last week, when the David, known as Dr. Bob Brown, celebrated the 25th anniversary of his and the Tasmanian Wilderness Society's victory over the Goliath of the state's Hydroelectric Commission's intention to flood the Franklin River Valley. You can imagine the argument at the time of the economics versus the struggle to save something of distinct, irreplaceable and astonishing beauty. My joy came from Senator Brown humbly quoting, a quarter of a century later, it showed people power could win against the odds. The other big inspirational buzz was hearing a few days ago about smart growth. The Premier's massive allocation of a strategic and diagnostic budget of $2.7 billion over 5 years to develop, in association with the ingenuity and innovation of the finest minds from the postgraduate urban architecture laboratory of RMIT and Monash University, selecting also from the disciplines of philosophy, eco-design and cost-effective urban renewal, to establish a total design concept for Melbourne, deeply examining the ideological and economic options available, with an emphasis on human capital, imagination, intelligence, and an emphasis on connectivity to surrounding areas as the keys to success. In The Age, it will be under the watchful guidance of Professors Bob Birrell and Paul Mees, who recently pardoned and allowed to speak his mind freely, said, "The Premier insists we revitalise the abandoned wastelands of those 19th century industrial pockets of Melbourne, the so-called brown wedges, and find a genuine solution to the crisis of affordable housing in Melbourne, and not just as a solution for Melbourne, but as an incomparable smart growth model for other great cities in the world, simply because we believe in these sorts of things." I'm sorry, I'm lying. Smart growth isn't true. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. It was just a weird dream I had the other night. But Bob Brown, an oldie but a goodie. It showed people power could win against the odds. 100 or so diverse community groups from across the state have linked up over the past few years. Meetings, emails, phone calls, all a bit on the hop. And at a recent core group meeting, I made a proposal that unless a scandal broke out in the government, our greatest strength was always going to be the amassed wisdom, the collective experience, and overwhelming resilience that has emerged from the astonishing breadth and power of Victoria's activist base. It's a motivation for each and every one of us to sense from today's representation the scale of our enterprise. We will never be able to meet regularly like this to maintain our momentum. This town hall, I think, is earmarked to become a planning brothel and casino. Perhaps a developer's museum. Photos of high-rises, 3-year-old chunks of concrete display. So I proposed a website. We are not all necessarily joined by politics or geography, but we are certainly united in purpose and passion and expertise. Believe it or not, we scored marvellousmelbourne.org. Of course, it must need always be followed by city, country and coast to truly represent us. The specifics of each individual community will be respected on the site, drawing all of us together under our common focus. The site must always be organic and grow accordingly. And at this point I'd like to thank Stephen Digby for his extraordinary work under a lot of pressure to create this site for us. Please log on, make suggestions, file your reports, air your grievances, your gossip, your history, any breaking news. Most importantly, invite cautious but curious visitors